Hi David. Okay, so I thought I'd just reply to your message as a video, because I think it'd be easier than trying to explain through email. I think you may have misunderstood the point of the second video. First of all, I created the video as a demonstration of how to add properties and how the information works with the searches. It's not an actual legitimate example of a property with an actual address. I just picked properties at random. I didn't care which agent they belonged to and just put them on the system. Now, one thing to understand as well is that the nature of data feeds, now the stuff I added was manual, so I was manually adding properties and and so on. But the fundamental fact is, when it comes to data feeds themselves, the property locations are predetermined. They're in the feed itself. We can't change that around. So if you, for example, talk about two different agents who in your email, for example, you sent to me, you specifically said Costa Blanca North 2 feeds, and you've got two companies, okay? And you've got Costa Blanca South, and you've got another company. And then Costa Calida, another company, and their feed. Now, as far as I'm concerned when reading this, you're saying, okay, well, this company and their data feed, their properties are Costa Blanca North. This company down here, Benenka, is Costa Blanca South, and obviously all their properties. But what you may not have done is looked at their actual data feed to see, for example, where their properties are actually located. And to be honest, the vast majority of properties for Benenka and for this first company, Invest Group, are in Alicante. So, as I said, the demo I showed you was a demo, so forget the demo for 2 seconds. What we've put together is the facility for you to assign an agent to Costa Blanca North. Because remember, when the data feed comes in, it's going to be automated. We're not going to manually add 300 plus properties. There is literally 311 properties in this company's data feed. Okay, we're not going to do it manually. It's an automated process. That's the whole point of a data feed. You automate the import. So that's why we suggested that we've added an option which logically does exactly what you've effectively asked for right here. You've said here's two companies, or here's two feeds. They're both meant to be Costa Blanca North. So when that data feed imports all 311 properties, those properties will be automatically assigned to Costa Blanca North. Now, if someone wants to manually go in there and change those individual properties around to different areas, they can do so. The option, as I've demonstrated, is there. But that's the only way to get around that. The automated process does not understand where these properties should be in terms of the informal naming conventions you're using, like Costa Blanca South and so on. I know that they're used in Spain, but they are informal locations. They're not actual property addresses. So in a data feed, you've got basically the province and you've got the town. Those are the two things you pretty much only have for every property. And as I said, a lot of these feeds will have Alicante pretty much throughout. But if you're now saying in your email that, some of this stuff is kind of granular, some properties may actually be in 2 or more locations, then that's a completely different subject. That is not the same as what you're asking for here. Do you understand my point? So that's the difference. So as I said, just to reiterate, if you're trying to if you're manually adding properties, which you've done in the past, it's very easy to have an option somewhere whereby as you go to the property details, you add the property information, you add the address and so on, and then maybe you've got a couple of tick boxes where you can select multiple informal names, such as Costa Calida, Costa Blanca North, Costa Blanca South. That property may well be in 2 or 3 different locations all at once, or considered to be. Do you know what I mean? So you can do that sort of thing if you're manually adding properties, because you as a human being can look at this and think, well, that address actually is in these 2 locations or more. It kind of is in the border of both. So when the person goes to the front end of the website and they do a search for Costa Blanca North and Costa Blanca South, they will see the same property. So that's very, very simple and easy when we're talking about manual intervention, when you're manually adding properties one by one. But when you're automating the process, which is how the data feed would be imported, when you're importing 300 plus properties at once, there's no way to do that. The automated process is not going to understand that this particular address is somehow magically between these 2 different locations informally. It's not going to know that. Okay? So that's the first thing to understand. So when you, in your email, I think you mentioned at the very end exactly that example. You mentioned here, finally, how would Costa Azar be categorized? This is part of Valencia, but then so is Alicante. So in other words, what you're saying is some properties that are in Valencia and some properties that are in Alicante may be considered both to be Costa Azar. And likewise, properties in Alicante may be considered to be Costa Blanca North. Or whatever. That's basically multiple categories. You're talking about multiple categories for the same property. Now obviously that's going to only really work if you manually do stuff. We can very easily add a feature, I imagine, so that every property you add manually you can determine multiple categories. So that property will show up under multiple areas when you do a search from here. And remember, this is only related to this, not anything else. The search stuff up here is based on the actual address of the property in the database, as it stands in the feature, I say. This is an artificial quick search. Do you understand? So this is artificial. And as I said, the only way to make it granular, as you're suggesting, is if you basically manually do that. If you go in and manually assign properties to multiple areas. So although the data feed can import 300 plus properties, if it turns out 100 of those properties actually should be between multiple categories, then someone's going to have to go in there manually and make those changes. It's the only way around that. It's just impossible any other way. That's a fact. Okay, so I understand your email, but as I said, first understand that the video we did was a demo purely of how to add properties, how the search is populated, and how the search is quite dynamic. That's all the demonstration was. We weren't concerned with whether the property's a real address, whether it's located in the correct whatever. This is purely a demo. So I wouldn't look at that as any kind of definitive thing. But fundamentally, your request has been that you've got these feeds, and these feeds should be assigned to those areas. Now, as I said, you've kind of done this under the basis that these companies must be only operating in those areas. But I've looked at their feeds and I've seen lots of properties that seem to be in the same location. I've seen lots of properties in this particular feed that says Alicante, and lots of properties in this feed that says Alicante as well. Now it's quite possible that the towns in both are actually in completely different locations and do qualify as Costa Blanca South and Costa Blanca North. I don't know. How would I know? I don't live in Spain. But the point basically is, if you're talking about globally assigning this particular company to Costa Blanca North, then the only way to do that is as we've put in place. But as I said, this is through automation. So as I said, just to kind of finalize what I'm trying to explain, when the import process runs, it would assign all those properties to Costa Blanca North, as you've basically requested right here. Likewise with this company, once you added this company in here and you've actually decided to assign that company, to Costa Blanca North, I can show you as an example. When it decides to get there. So this company here, Moria Invest. In your email, you've suggested that they are Costa Blanca North. Okay, so as a demonstration, remember this is just demo data, by the way. We've got them as Costa Blanca North. So if I look at this company's details, here they are, Costa Blanca North, and their data feed would go down here. And this is just done for convenience. Bear in mind, this is done for convenience. Because obviously, when you import 300 plus properties, no one's going to manually do that. The whole point of a data feed is that you automate the process so it happens quickly. All 300 properties import, 1,000 plus images import automatically by themselves within a few minutes. So if you're telling us in your email that this company is Costa Blanca North, then naturally speaking, all of the properties would automatically assign as Costa Blanca North. Why wouldn't they? That's what you've asked for. Now you've effectively changed what you're trying to achieve, and what you're saying here is more granular. And I understand this. I understand the point you're trying to make, but the point basically is that this is not possible through automation, because the data feed information is too vague. It doesn't contain enough information for us to know anything about these locations and how the different locations of the properties even fit into any of these. And that's why I said we kind of have it global and then it was assign them. But as I said, the option to go in there manually and change properties to individual locations is there. If it makes it easier, we can certainly make it so that there's actually multiple categories. So, for example, this one only says Costa Blanca. We could add tick box or something. We can make it so that you can basically select more than one of these. So this property may be under Costa Azar and Costa Blanca North, for example. That way, when the person searches here, the same property will come up under both searches. You know, so that's possible, I imagine. But that's the only way around it, is if you go in there manually and change things after the fact that they've imported. Okay, so hopefully that makes some sense. And as I said, you have to realize the big difference between manually adding properties one by one, where you have this kind of natural ability to look at the property address and say, okay, this property address, this town or this location is commonly understood to be between multiple places, Costa del North, Costa Calida, whatever, and automation. When you're automating something to import, you have to rely purely on what's already predetermined. If there is information that's usable that tells us this property is actually Costa Blanca or Costa Calida, then we can do that. But without that information, it's impossible. Simple as that. Okay, so to reiterate, how the process will work is it will import properties and it will assign them to the areas you've suggested in your initial email. And if someone wants to go in manually and then reassign some of those properties to multiple categories, then you can do so. But that really comes down to how important you think this particular feature is. You know, I don't know, it's a very convenient feature, but you have to understand that there is fundamental problems with stuff like this when you're relying on data feeds. Also understand that some properties don't even have complete addresses. Sometimes they're missing information, you know. So there's all those kind of issues. But as I said, if you want to use this kind of feature, you're going to have to be prepared to go in there and manually update some properties with the correct one, or to change it to something else, or to potentially add multiple. But we haven't added a multiple feature. It's something we can certainly look into and see what that would cost to put in place and how much time it may take to do that. But ultimately, as it stands right now, we've implemented this thing in a very simple, easy way, but it's pretty much as you've requested it. You know, here. But as I said, I understand the point that some properties in these feeds may be between multiple areas. They could be considered different areas. Like my address where I live is considered Brockley, London, but it's also considered New Cross. It's both. But an automated process is only going to pick one or the other. It's not going to know both. Do you understand my point? So you kind of have to remember that. This is data feeds we're talking about, not manually adding properties. If you want to manually add properties one by one, it's very easy to just assign it wherever you like. But through automation, you've got to have some predetermined factors that allows that kind of thing to work. And unfortunately, the data feeds themselves don't have much information at all. I can sort of show you. Here's Benenko's feed, and as you can see, you've got down here. This is the address information. That's all we have. The province and the town. That's it. That's all we've got. There's nothing else. Okay. There's no mention of Costa Blanca North. There's no mention of Costa Calida. None of that stuff is there. So an automated process is not going to be able to do anything with that. And that's why I said the simplest solution based on your email is to actually assign the agent to Costa Blanca North, and then any properties that import via automation will be assigned to that area. I understand there's problems in doing that, because you'll click on Costa Blanca South on a website and it will pop up with properties that people typically know are not in that area. You know? Obviously, this doesn't affect the normal search. If I search for Alicante, it will just find properties that are in Alicante, regardless of which agent they belong to. If I then want to break it down by a town, then obviously it will show just that town and so on. So that's as it should be. But this quick search is obviously problematic because you're talking about places that are not necessarily technically formal locations. And they're not in the data feeds, so there's no way to know. If we had Costa Blanca North, Costa Blanca South for every property in the feed, that'd be great. but we don't. Okay, so hopefully, as I said, that makes some sense. I'm guessing that just from reading your email, that's what you was trying to explain. But as I said, there's lots of things that can be done, but there's things that can't be done, especially when you're talking about automation. And the bottom line is, when it comes to automating stuff, you kind of have to have stuff predetermined, as much information as possible. The only way I can see this being part of what you're saying being possible, and I say part, but not completely, the only way I can see part of that working is if you was to provide a list of all of the locations for Costa Blanca North. So if, for example, you gave us a list of 50 provinces or 50 places within Costa Blanca North, then we could make it so that when the data feed imports, if it finds Alicante or it finds a certain town, it can then assign it to Costa Blanca North. And if the same data feed has a property that's in a slightly different location, it can assign it to Costa Blanca South. Do you understand my point? And it could do that. But that wouldn't obviously solve the problem where you got properties that are kind of on the border of more than one. That's a completely different type of situation, and it very much requires a human interaction to solve that problem. You know, and this is Spain. Spain doesn't have proper postcodes and so on like London does. London has a very good postcode system whereby we can very easily do stuff like that, where boundaries kind of meet and stuff. But in Spain, it's not the case. The data information is extremely vague. It's not doable. So as I said, that's the only solution I can think of, is if you can provide a list of all of the different locations that are considered Costa Blanca North, South, Calida, and so on. And then we can make use of that information to kind of granularly assign properties to those locations. That way you'll get halfway there. But it wouldn't solve the crossover issue that you get with some places, which you've mentioned in your email. Okay, so let me know if that makes sense. If not, just give us a call, because as I said, it's very difficult to explain this kind of stuff through an email. It'll be extremely long-winded.